Hey, I'm Matt with Home Improvement and Repair Magazine, and here I've built a coffee table out of reclaimed lumber. And in doing so, there's a lot of texture variation, a lot of relief, dents and dings from nail holes and all sorts of that character that comes with a rustic table, which gives it a really great look, but it's going to eat up a lot of grime and stuff like that, lint, over time if I don't treat the surface. So what I'm going to do now is use this two-part epoxy product. It's called Quick Set Seal. It's a Wisebond product. This is the first step in my epoxy coating of this, and the idea is to give it a perfectly glassy, smooth top, or it'd be great to use. It won't collect any grime or that sort of thing. This is my first time using this particular product, and so you're going to join me and see how things go. Okay, I'm going to start by applying it to anything I see with a lot of relief. And that includes these little insect holes, pinholes, whatever they are. The seams between the shiplap boards, which are, I guess, actually tongue and groove. Anything that I think might cause a bubble in the flood coat, which is the next pour that I'm going to do after this initial strategic coat, where I'm hitting what I think will be problem areas. And now I'm using the flat edge of this trowel to put on a very thin, kind of a skim coat over the surface before I apply my flood coat. And this is to basically seal off any remaining porosity problems from the cracks and the relief and these wood surfaces. Okay, here we are. I have applied the seal coat of epoxy, which is to prevent any bubbles from bleeding out of the porous wood here. Now what I'm going to do next is use another two-part epoxy product from Wisebond. It's called Bar and Tabletop Epoxy. And I'm going to mix this together in a couple of buckets and combine it, and I'm going to pour it over the table. And the idea is it's a self-leveling product that's going to put about an 1/8 to 1/4 inch coat. Probably only requires an 8-inch coat on this project. Supposed to make it glassy smooth for a great tabletop surface. Couple of things I've learned so far. When you're mixing your product with the drill and the paddle, operate this on a very slow speed. Otherwise you impregnate the epoxy with tiny little bubbles, and you don't want to trap bubbles into the finish, right? One other thing, the epoxy, once you combine it, the chemical reaction that hardens the epoxy becomes very hot. So you don't want to use a flimsy plastic cup like this Dixie cup, because as you can see, it melted. It makes a big mess. You want to use a sturdier, thicker plastic cup like the souvenir cups you get at the baseball games and stuff. So I'm about to start mixing up my epoxy, and we'll see how this goes. So what I'm doing now is I have two 20 grit sandpaper, and I'm just scuff sanding the surface. Well, you're probably thinking, why are you messing up this nice clear seal coat? Now everything's cloudy. But I'm going to take a rag and some denatured alcohol, remove the loose powder from my scuff marks, and then once I pour the flood coat on, everything should blend back glassy clear again. I'm surrounded by a big piece of plywood, much bigger than the table, and it's covered with, plywood is covered with plastic drop cloth to help catch the runoff, which is going to be inevitable here. Wasn't sure how much epoxy to use, but I do have some more mixed up I'm going to go ahead and add here in just a second. Here I am using this heat gun to get rid of some bubbles that have risen in the flood coat of my epoxy. This is a pretty neat trick. Okay, well, in the end, I was really pleased with how everything turned out. I've got a smooth glass-like surface to my otherwise rough reclaimed boards, so it's a nice usable countertop. But that epoxy has preserved the look and character of what I wanted to do, and turned out really how I hoped it would turn out. So I'm really pleased with the Wisebond product. It was easy to use. Any difficulties I had, really my fault. Couple of things I did learn. For instance, along the edge boards, I had put some painter's tape on the underside so to prevent the epoxy from bleeding through. However, painter's tape, there were some gaps where it didn't stick right, and I had a leak over here on one side. As a result, I had a low spot along one of the seams. So that required me to pour a second coat. Before I did that, I took a caulk tube and I caulked the inside seams of the edging so I would not repeat that mistake. One more tip on what not to do. Whenever I went back to pour my follow-up flood coat to repair my low spot, I thought I'd mix up a little less epoxy to conserve product and to make less mess. That was a mistake. You need all the epoxy to cover the table so it will have its self-leveling effect. I didn't do that, so I ended up whipping up a little extra epoxy to add. And my mistake when I did that was I reused a cup I'd already used as a mixer. And in doing so, there was some residual product that had already begun to harden. Whenever I poured the product onto the epoxy flood, there were little chips of hardening epoxy in there that I had to go pick out. And that was very, very aggravating. Don't make that mistake. Otherwise, good luck with your epoxy product. I may have use this for a coffee table, but you can also use it for a countertop, a bar, if you're building one in your home, or those live edge slab tables that are just a big raw cut piece of wood. Those are very popular these days. So anyway, very good project here, and join us next time with home improvement and repairs.